Hello, we are live. Thank you all very much for tuning in to the Bloodstream. I am absolutely thrilled to be joined tonight by the writer and the director of the critically acclaimed In a Violent Nature, uh, Mr. Chris Nash. How you doing tonight, sir?
Doing great. Thank you for having me, Justin. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, man, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and congratulations on the success of In a Violent Nature.
Thank you. Yeah, just kind of snuck up on us, but yeah, really appreciate it.
Yeah, right on, man. So, having seen In a Violent Nature a couple of times, let's just say, would it be a stretch to assume that you're a bit of a genre fan, specifically a fan of slashers? Would that be a safe assumption?
No, this is where I'm gonna get exposed.
Oh no,
As a
oh
complete
no.
fraud. I grew up with genre films. I'm like a genre fan. I was the kid in high school that had all the Fangoria posters in my locker. But I didn't like devour slashers specifically.
Okay.
Um, I appreciated them all, but yeah, slashers were. I was I love the monsters. I got a background in prosthetics, so I really dug like the more monsters, the more like full monster makeup type things. But yeah, it's regardless, it's kind of impossible to be a fan of the genre and not be also a fan of slasher films and have an appreciation for them. And and then the amount of technique that goes into like pulling off a slasher that works, like the filmmaking technique,
Oh
like
yeah.
the craft
Mhm.
of it is just yeah, it's undeniable. So
Well, you certainly did that, and in a different way than we've seen a lot of slashers done before. But we'll we'll definitely get into that.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
like just not create, deciding not to create tension and suspense. It's like yeah. I wonder why nobody's done that before.
you're changing the game, man. You're changing the game.
Yeah.
But from the research I did on you, the extensive research I did on you,
Mm.
it sounds like we had fairly similar, childhoods. I think we're about the same age, small town guys, horror fans, spent a lot of time in the video store, I'm guessing by the background there, maybe?
Yep. I did spent like growing up in the woods for sure. Spent a lot of time in the video store because what else are you gonna do during the day other than watch a copy of Mick Garris's The Stand that you taped off a TV over and over again every day?
Mhm.
It's like you just. I think when you're, I don't want to say not so much of an outdoor kid, but like when you're not involved in like sports, I guess. I was never really like an athlete. I was never like an organized sports guy. So I was kind of always the arty kid that, stayed in, build stuff. And so yeah, lots of TV in the summers, lots of videos, and I didn't have cable or anything from where I grew up. It was way too rural. So, we had like the big five channels and that was it. So yeah, the video store was definitely a place where we'd go every week and get what we could.
Cool. And I mean, today's generation will never understand the importance of the video store. Do you have any favorite, particular favorite video store memories you can share?
Um, Probably like the utter disappointment of finally renting Demon Wind, after seeing that lenticular cover that was like
Mhm,
embossed, and you're
mhm.
like, "This is gonna be awesome." And then, I mean, I appreciate the hell out of it now. Now it's just like, a wild a wild nonsensical ride, but yeah, at the time watching that as a kid, just being like, "I don't know what's happening." I couldn't tell you. This definitely doesn't feel like Evil Dead 2.
No, no, no.
Yeah.
Demon Wind is not anything like Evil Dead 2, not at all. No, no.
Yeah. Um, Also just, like, I don't know, I tried, when I finally entered my collecting phase and just going to the video store and always, getting to that rack of, like, previously viewed videos and digging through that and finding those kinda gems. That was more my speed. Like, finding that, what was it? That Thorn EMI copy of Evil Dead that was always like so elusive. Getting those like larger, I don't even know what they're called, but like the cardboard, the fold out cardboard videos, like
Uh, like
yeah,
the gatefold ones? Was that what it's called?
yeah, I don't know. Are they called that? I see. This is all
I
my credibility's gone out the window. But but yeah, whenever you can nab one of those, I think I got like the Philip Kaufman Invasion of the Body Snatchers of that, and like a copy of Exterminator 2, where you're like, oh, these are like pieces that I can like put up and not just like keep in my shelf. These are artifacts. Yeah, stuff like that. I really love the hunt.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. The hunt. That's something, I've talked about this with people too. Like, streaming is just so like we have too much access to stuff. Like,
Yeah.
you went to
No,
the
it's the
video store
exact
was a
same thing as like
yeah.
looking through porn online where you're just like, is this the right one to watch right now? And then you're just like, no, no, I can save baby elephant for later. I can I can do
Whatever
yeah.
floats your boat, you know?
Yeah, whatever. Yeah. But yeah, I find just that difference of like going through and just scrolling past, and there's no cover art, you know?
No,
There's no
no.
real marketing to get you, 'cause like, when it comes down to it, I don't know, I wonder what the behind the scenes are, but whether or not Netflix feels just as successful locking you in an infinite scrolling pattern as they do if you're watching what's on their screen. Like, if you're in the store regardless, what do they care?
It's yeah, exactly. It's all engagement for the stockholders, whether you're
Yeah,
watching or scrolling, you're there, you're on the platform.
yeah, exactly. So that's kinda interesting too.
And you nailed it with, like, the artwork on those boxes
Mhm.
in the '80s. My god, that's some of the most beautiful stuff. I mean, Spookies and freaking
Yeah,
you said you mentioned Evil Dead, like, the Evil Dead 2 with the skull
yeah.
staring at you, those eyes, I mean, my god, such incredible artwork. It's all Photoshop now, it's all just,
It's all
you know
Photoshop, or it's all just like stills that are kind of like slightly tweaked. Like the
Mhm.
actual element of creating a really impactful graphic design to entice somebody to spend money is gone. So,
Yeah, yeah,
and that's all
yeah.
part of it. It's really part of the appreciation um, for renting or watching anything. You know,
Yeah, I mean, it really, really, really is. What was the first just a horror movie in general that had a big impact on you, or the one that made you go, "That's what I wanna do"?
I don't know if there was one that really influenced me into wanting to make films. Because I just always liked movies. I always liked storytelling. Um, and so like I started out, as a kid, just straight up just writing, and then getting into comics, and then wanting to be like a cartoonist, and then getting into stop motion and wanting to be a stop motion animator. So I like devoured animation when I was like all through my teens. And it wasn't until my last year of high school where I felt like maybe I should actually just do live action film. It's all the same. It's relatively the same art. Um, but I had it in my mind that it would be quicker. Like the output would be quicker if I did live action instead of animation. And that was a lie, but it's where I wound up. Um, but as far as like things that were very impactful for me and things that like really stood out, probably don't know whether it would be Evil Dead 2 or Army of Darkness, because Army of Darkness was
Mhm.
first for me. I was of that age where I was like a little too young when Evil Dead 2 came out, but when Army of Darkness came out, because you didn't know it was like the third entry when you're watching the ads on TV, you thought it's its own thing. Um, that was just so much fun. Like when you're in like grade 7, grade 8, throwing that on, and it's just like such a blast to watch, and you're like,
Yeah.
this is everything I like. It has all the scary stuff, but it's not necessarily treating it scary. It's like such a fantasy film, but it's also like very modern. And there's that, smarmy vulgarity to it. It was
Mhm.
just I loved that. That was one that, we wore the tape out watching. and tried to get like all of my friends to watch it, and just thought everybody would enjoy it the same way I did, but no, they definitely there's a lot there was a lot of people that that didn't. And then from there, when you know you do a little digging and you realize like, oh, this is actually Evil Dead 3, and go back and watch Evil Dead 2 and Evil Dead and yeah, Evil Dead 2 for me was really impactful for just the inventiveness and being able to recognize at a young age how inventive the style of shooting was and how like frenetic it was, and then the amount of momentum and movement that all of the shots had and the control of the camera that Sam Raimi had that really just turned me into a fan. Um, yeah, those two were probably, you know, kind of interchangeable in the impact that they had. Uh, you know, which I guess in this context is kind of hilarious for making a movie that's just following a guy slowly walking through the woods. But
No, I totally see the similarities. You know, the demon camera flying through the woods. Now you
sure,
gotta,
yeah, yeah,
you know, he's just going slow through the
yeah,
woods. You know.
um, yeah. But I was also like somebody that would like read through Leonard Maltin's movie guides and
Mm,
get to the point where like I knew where to have it, like you can open it anywhere, and I would know at least one movie on that page, even if I'd never seen it before. You know, just from like
mm,
rereading the plots of everything and trying to connect, like, okay, this person starred in that, and this is directed by this person, and like mapping out that whole era of an actor or a director's career, just from a book. Um, those were, yeah, spent a lot of time just reading those guides.
mm. That's awesome. Yeah, my brother has Leonard Maltin movie guides going back freaking 15 years. So yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, also pre-internet too, right? Like you
oh,
could just go on IMDb and like that's another thing I think nobody really understands these days is that you can't just look up an actor and see
mhm,
what they were up to. There
mhm.
was like there was the Leonard Maltin guide that you had to get every year, like the, you know, Guinness Book of World Records. And then I don't know if you had the same like thing as I did, but it was like a syndicated column in like TV Guide or something where you would just like write in and ask like an industry professional, "Hey, what's this actor doing?" Or like, or like, "What's coming up for this person?" And then they'd answer, and then so you'd be able to keep on tabs as far as like um, what like a new movie coming out or anything, because yeah, they'd have this one industry insider answering everything, and you'd be able to know like, oh, in a year, this
Yeah,
movie is
yeah.
going to come out, and I haven't even heard of it before, or like this deal was signed. Um, yeah, I remember at one point in time reading like I because I read that all the time too. I was really fascinated with the idea of celebrity as a kid. Um, and at one point in time, somebody wrote in, "What's Bruce Campbell up to?" And my mind was blown that like there was just other Bruce Campbell fans, and and then like they'd go into I think that was like around the time he was just starting Briscoe County, and I was
Ah,
just like, oh wow, this is neat. I didn't have Fox. I lived in the woods in Canada, but it was interesting. It was just like
mm,
great to know that
yeah,
he's
yeah.
doing stuff.
I mean, I lived in the, you know, the mountains of Kentucky, so I had a subscription to Entertainment Weekly, and, like, you know, I would read that and, you know, all the new movies and here's what's going on here and there, and I, you know, felt like some kind of industry insider or something,
Yeah,
and
like you're the kid at school that always knew, like, oh yeah, or
yeah.
this is the new. I don't know if you guys know about the Super Mario Brothers movie that's coming out, but they're
Have you ever
really
heard
taking
of
some chances. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. You ever heard of this new guy called John Leguizamo? He's an up and comer, you know what I
yeah,
mean?
he's a bit of a
Um
pest, but whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. I remember, of course, pre-internet at Blockbuster Video, I asked one of the employees, like, you know, "Do you have this movie or that movie?" And he goes, "Well, we've got a book back there that's got everything in it. All the directors, all," and like I went to the back of the very back of the place. They had this huge book. It was like 4 phone books
Oh
that
wow.
like that was like their reference. That's the movie guide back there. And it had all the, you know, the movies and who directed them and what else they directed, and it was just immense. That was
That was
the
the
internet.
IMDb printed out.
That was the
Yeah,
I exactly, yes,
yeah,
yes, yes. Mm.
yeah. What a
How
time!
how times have changed.
I know. I've gotten so much lazier.
Exactly, I was gonna say, have they changed for the better, though?
No, no, because the preciousness of those moments and those discoveries are
Yeah,
just gone. You know,
yeah,
it's like finding a new band, or
it's
like
true.
digging
Mhm.
through a CD rack, or like even the pawn shop, or all that, all that being gone. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's weird. I know there's a
yeah,
lot of talk about the like commodification and accessibility of media and art and what it does to it, but there is something to be said for the fact that, yeah, even if I didn't like an album or something growing up, I'd watch it over and over again, or listen to it over and over again, and gradually learn to like it.
mhm,
I
mhm.
mean, that sounds like imprisonment, but you gradually like come to appreciate different things of it that you wouldn't have heard the first time or seen the first time.
Yeah, yeah. You were kinda stuck with it. You'd spent the money on it. It wasn't like you were,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, so, eh. When did In a Violent Nature first start to percolate?
Um, like it was a light boil, I guess.
Nah,
In the probably like late 2000s is when I really took a serious consideration to um making a movie like that, and making like a genre film like that, because it all everything stems back to Gus Van Zant's like death trilogy that he did of Jerry and Elephant and Last Days, and I just really
yeah,
love those films and wanted to make a genre film of it, like using that same technique. And yeah, that just kind of spun out from there. But it was only while I was working on Psycho Gorman that the conversation came up behind the scenes about like a slasher film, or taking like a different angle on a slasher. And then I just pitched them that kind of nonsense idea that I had that really wasn't fleshed out much. Um, and everyone was like, "Yeah, you should probably write that down. It sounds like a good thing, and we'd all like help out making it and come on board." So then I took it seriously, and that was I forget when Psycho Gorman was in production. I think 2018 maybe is when we were
that sounds about right.
yeah, when we were shooting it. So yeah, it was about then that's when it became serious. Um and like maybe a year later, I actually like wrote it out and we pitched it.
Mhm. Let me just mention to everybody in the chat. First, thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate it. If we have time toward the end of the show, we'll do a little Q&A. So if you do have questions for Chris, go ahead and throw those out there. I'll do my best to keep an eye on the chat. And we'll if we got time, we'll do a little bit of a Q&A. But you always envisioned it as from that perspective of following Johnny, sort of
Yeah.
third person style.
Yeah, because that's like nowadays everybody like looks at it and um applies video game aesthetic to it, like third
Right.
person following aesthetic. But it really was those Gus Van Sant movies who had that aesthetic also built
Yeah.
into them, that we were trying to ape. But yeah, from the very start, we were like, it's not gonna be everybody's cup of tea. We're gonna have it's gonna be very deliberate. That's the word we're using uh, to describe the pacing. But it's going to be very deliberate. It's going to be told, you know, almost entirely from the point of view of a character who doesn't say a word, and you never see their face. Um, and with no soundtrack to motivate how anybody should be feeling, and shooting it in a 4:3 ratio to, you know, give this kind of almost claustrophobic feeling, but also more importantly, just make it put it in the same box that we all watched slashers in when we were growing up.
Exactly, exactly. And the first time I watched the movie, I was just so into it. I didn't even realize it until like the second time I watched it, and I was like, "Wait a minute, there's like no score here. There's music, but it's like in the movie. It's not like
Yeah,
written for the movie or composed for them. Like the soundtrack is nature and like the metronome walking of Johnny,
yeah,
crushing the
exactly.
underbrush, and you just sort of forget that. Well, there's no music here. There's no score. I thought that was a cool little thing. But you mentioned it. It's a slasher movie where we follow the slasher.
Yeah.
Was that a hard sell?
No, it really wasn't. Um it was kind of like remarkably not easy, but like people kind of understood what we were going for. Like right away they were like they could kind of see it and they could envision it, and we didn't have a giant budget anyways, so it wasn't something that was an enormous investment. Um but yeah, everybody kind of believed in the project from the get-go. So I mean, I know there's a lot of a lot of horror stories about like pounding the pavement trying to get funding and financing to get your movie made, but like it wasn't really the case for us. It was relatively quick.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. What was the most difficult scene to shoot?
The most difficult scene to shoot, and like the reoccurring nightmare that I have is the lake scene, um, where a character dies getting pulled under the water and drowned by Johnny. That scene was going to be much more intensive. There's so much more involved in it. Right now, as it is, it's a locked off camera on one side of the shore, locked off camera on another side of the shore. We let it play out nice and slow. Uh, and then we kind of just cut out of it from there, and let the moment kind of amplify the solitude of being in the woods and being on the lake, which I think works incredibly well at that point in time in the film leading into the next kill. So I'm really happy it's the way it is right now. But originally it was going to be so much more involved. We had planned to like bring the camera, have the camera follow Johnny all in one take up along the shore, dive with him into the water, follow him underneath the water as he's like walking along the bottom, um, and then seeing him see the girl and pull her under with a hook and drown her there. She's fighting back, and it was just it would have been a lot for um, a much more much less modestly budgeted film to do. Yeah,
Well, you mentioned like, oh, there's no suspense. I think that's a great suspense moment because she's in the water, just splashing around, having fun. You've seen Johnny go in the water, so it's like, how long is it going to take him to walk at the bottom of the lake to
yeah,
get her? So you're just waiting for like and that was that. I love the subtlety of just the camera holding it. And then when you switch to the other angle and she just rises up, she's
yeah,
just floating, and then Johnny just casually walks out of the lake.
yeah. I mean, I really like the way it plays out now. Now I'm like, okay, that was fun. And when you're making a movie, I find that sometimes the things that you like the most are the things that you didn't have planned and you kind of had to just scrape together. And I don't know whether you like them the most because they're the newest to you, whereas everything else that you had conceived, it's probably been rolling around in your head for years. And then
Right.
something happens where it's like, oh, this was just slapped together in a week planning that, and it seems newer, it seems fresher. So you tend to I find I tend to just have more appreciation for that.
Yeah. And I've talked to a number of filmmakers who've, they've had to compromise or they've had to do something right there on the spot. And like, they're like, that's my favorite part of the movie now. Like
Yeah.
it just works so much better than what I had envisioned. And, I don't know, there's something about that spontaneity. I think that, and you're on you're under pressure. You got, time is money and,
Yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah.
I have to ask you about the kill, the most graphic kill in the movie. I think you know which one. The
Yep.
lady who's like, I'm going to go stretch, and she
Mhm.
got stretched. She got
Yeah.
stretched on it. Walk us through setting that one up, shooting it, getting it right, all the technical stuff that went along with that scene.
Oh, well, the loca The location itself was fairly remote. So even from where our base camp was, it was about I think we're around 20 minutes away from our base camp. So it was always a drive in, and even then, once we got to our staging area, our unloading area, then we had to throw everything on like my Ford Escape, all the equipment and stuff, and then go down a logging trail. And so the in and out times of that, like on a technical aspect, like when I think of technically how to how stuff gets made, all I'm thinking of is like logistic things right now. Especially writing the sequel, like I am definitely writing it with a bit of that logistic brain of being like, okay, this sounds great, but like, how hard is this going to be? Um,
Right.
but yeah, so with all the unloads, with all the like the distance and the travel to set to the actual shooting location from like our base camp, and then from our accommodations, we wound up with not a heck of a lot of time during the day to shoot. So that's one thing that you're always working against. And then also, this is just primarily a big uh prosthetics scene,
Oh yeah.
um, where we have different prosthetics appliances and different prosthetics pieces that we have to consider. And having a prosthetics background, one of the things that me and Steve Kostansky, the prosthetics lead on this, he who's also fantastic, amazing director. Did The Void, Psycho Gorman. He's got Frankie Frico playing at Fantastic Fest this weekend as well. And but what we always talk about, or one of the things that we did talk about, working in shops, is the amount of work that you put into things for different movies and different shows. And then when it comes time to get on set, you've got this thing that you've been working on for weeks, and they tell you right away, like, okay, we're going to get this done. We got some time for it. Before lunch, we'll get you shot out. You'll be ready to go home. You can pack up, clean up. It's great. And we're like, that's fantastic. Always, without fail, you're there after lunch. You're there up until the very last shot of the day is going to be this prosthetics gag that you're doing. Everyone's tired. Nobody's really happy that they've got this one little gag left, and you've got uh, essentially one take to do it. And a lot of them are built with like you got one take anyways. But if you're shooting in the middle of the day, you can always reset. There's time to clean up. But this is the end of the day. Everybody's already like, we're already in overtime. Nobody's happy. And so your 3 weeks, sometimes a month of work comes down to, half a minute on set, and then you're done. So one of the things that we always try to do is give the prosthetics the respect they deserve. Like, you're doing so much work on them to get them done. Like, take the time to shoot them.
Oh yeah.
So with all the different builds we had, there's just a lot of time. Like, we shot out the actress Charlotte, and the stuff with Charlotte and Rye, who plays Johnny. We tried to shoot all that stuff out first to get her out of the scene, and then to be able to just focus entirely on the actual prosthetics themselves. But then you're also having to account for just the safety measures, because we are shooting, it's not the steepest cliff, it's not the highest cliff, but we're shooting it in an area that's compromised, and it could be dangerous. So just the rigging and of like even the stunt rigging to just have her that close to the edge at some point in time, like
Hmm.
all that stuff takes like an hour or two, sometimes 3 hours, just to set up, just to make sure that the safety checks are all in place. All that stuff eats up your time. So I think it took us like at least a day and a half just to shoot out the all of the footage in that scene with Charlotte, the actor herself. Um, as well, one of the things that we were fighting against was the um, the insects out there. I'm
Hmm.
from Northern Ontario. I'm used to it. I'm fine. But a lot of the crew wasn't. They were just like head to toe and bug nets. And yeah, it can drive you crazy. So even your personal working time at like out there, that just shrinks, and you want to get out. You want to be in and out and head home. So you're fighting against that as well. And then when it came time to actually shooting the gag, I think we ended up doing 3 days shooting the gag. Um, 2 solid days of shooting it. just being like setting everything up, getting everything looking in a way that's like enough to convey what we wanted to have happen. And then we ended up going there for I think half a day later on, just to get some pickup shots, because we actually shot the scene and then edited it together mostly, and then realized like the pacing would work better if we got this like a long shot with the characters,
Mhm.
stuff like that. And so we went back to get those. But yeah, so that scene itself is like probably about 5 days, lots
Yeah,
of
and
back and forth.
it yeah, and on a movie that I'm sure you didn't have, an extensive schedule. That was a big chunk of the shooting schedule, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, it definitely, every day matters when you're doing
Yeah.
something like this. So we would try to double up as much as we could. So like if there's any dead time, or we would have, or any kind of like a tail end of a day or a start of a day where other people were coming in, we'd try to get shots of Johnny walking through the woods, or like for instance, we wrapped up one of those days with everybody was packing up and the sun was going down. So we were like, okay, well, let's just get Johnny walking along the edge of this cliffside here. There was a trail. Let's get him walking along the edge, and we'll double that up for a morning shot. And just trying to do what you can to cross things off the list if they aesthetically look like what you're hoping to achieve. All of that just helps so much with the bottom line at the end of the day.
What was the size of your crew?
When we actually shot the film, we uh shot the film essentially twice. We shot it once we shot about 70% of it. We're saying 70-75 percent of the film, um with a crew of up to 30 people at some points, I
Oh,
believe.
okay.
Pretty healthy crew. And then just due to so many issues happening, big one being the that our lead actor, the one we had originally cast to play Johnny, got very ill halfway through the production and had to leave, and we had to replace him. um, and just the process of replacing him was really difficult, um, and put us on the back foot when we were already kind of on the back foot. There was a lot of weather problems going on,
Mm,
um, and yeah, there was just a unending series of issues. But by the time we were done 4 weeks of shooting with like 30 people, we realized, and we edited together that footage. We realized that just nothing was working the way we thought it was going to. So we reshot the entire thing from scratch with new actor in place, with an incredibly reduced crew. I think like there's at least half of the crew, so maximum maybe 15 people on some days when we actually shot the film.
mhm,
But there's a lot of days where it was like maybe six.
okay, okay.
Yeah.
Well, we were just talking about the kill. There's some really good kills in this movie.
Thanks.
What are
Yeah.
just some of your what are some of your just favorite overall horror movie kills?
Favorite overall horror movie kills. I think one of them that always okay. I've got a real thing with for body horror. Um,
Mm,
I was wondering where this all comes back to, and I've realized it comes back to this like dread and this existential horror of hearing the story in public school, like when we still had like Bible studies in the morning, hearing the story of Lot's wife turning into a pillar of salt, and
oh,
not being able to wrap my mind around that magic, and just being like, "What do you mean she's salt?" And then the Bible instructor was just like, "No, she turned into a pillar of salt," and I'm like, "That doesn't make sense. So can she get better?" And I'm like, "No, she's salt," and so that like gave me nightmares. When I was younger, just thinking of like your body as something that's not concrete, that's something that can change and become something else entirely. Um,
mm,
so I'm always unsettled by like when I'm by like metamorphose, or like turning into like solid objects or anything, or so even tacky stuff um in Wishmaster, I know, like when Kane Hodder like becomes the pane of glass. It's like
I
I
was
don't know
thinking
what.
Wishmaster when you
Yeah, some stuff like that. I don't know why, but that's just so unsettling to me. Um, or like Jason X. One of my favorite deaths is the liquid nitrogen head freeze and then
Oh, yeah.
smash, and just where you're like,
Mhm.
oh man, there's no putting that back together again. That's
No.
yeah,
Yeah. She's a goner. There's no
yeah,
yeah, she's
yeah.
yeah, no, no. Yeah.
So things like that that they always like I always find those like very, very unsettling more than anything. I think even at the start of Wishmaster, there's that just like kind of quick gag at the skeleton leaving the body. Uh which is
Mm,
like super goopy and gory, and I don't know what it is. Like when I look at that, when my brain looks at that, it's like, well, what is happening there? Like, does your skeleton become an entity unto its own, separate from your body, and is trying to leave, or are you the skeleton leaving your skin? And then what does that? Yeah, things like things like that just bother me to no end, and have this deep ingrained fear of like just existence that really gets to me.
wow, that's cool. So, if you're a body horror fan, clearly you've gotta be a fan of fellow Canadian David Cronenberg, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like yeah, I really kind of like love all of Cronenberg's work. I don't think there's one that I don't like.
So, are we gonna see a Chris Nash body horror movie at some point in the future?
Maybe. I mean, it's always kind of what where things turn in my brain. Like even in a violent nature, like I feel like all the gags are body horror gags in a weird way.
Mhm.
I just feel like whenever you're forced to regard people or like yourself or the human body as nothing more than a piece of meat that's expendable, that's where I'm like, that's where I kind of find what body horror is. Like there is nothing permanent about this existence, and what you think you are is, could be just a
Yeah.
million little bacteria in your stomach controlling your
Yeah.
brain. Like who knows?
I remember Jeff Burr saying something similar to that, when he was talking about Chainsaw 3 and, like, when you get down to it, like, your body's just a bunch of chemicals and goop
Yeah.
and, like, it just that's it, you know?
Yeah, no, that's well, another one, okay. I know it's kind of
Scarecrow?
like
Night of
Scarecrow
the
with the
Scarecrow?
with the
Night of the
seed in the body. Yes, that was
Yes!
another one. Yeah,
I
Night
I
of the
knew
Scarecrow.
I knew it.
Yeah,
Yes, yes. Actually, it's so funny you bring that up. I rewatched Night of the Scarecrow, like, 3 nights ago, just out of nowhere. I was thinking about Jeff Burr, like, "I've not seen that in a long time. Let's see if that's anywhere available," and I watched it. So,
yeah.
it's crazy you bring that up.
No, that's
But
that's another one because I know it's like one of these things that you can kind of parallel to like Evil Dead, but like no, that one for me just like the seed taking root in the body and just how it's
mhm,
shot is I mean this is what it is for somebody without a score in their film, but like just the music in that behind the
mhm,
scenes of that and while it's going on, everything just like compounds the visuals, the sound, the gag itself, the creepiness, and how much you don't see going on. I just find like that sequence is so masterful. I really, really
yeah,
love that. But I
yeah,
love that
yeah,
movie too. I love Jeff Burr. I think Jeff Burr is like one of these like he should be regarded and regaled
yeah,
way more than he is. Like that,
yeah.
Offspring, and like all the sequels too.
Yeah,
Like
the
I mean,
Stepfather 2 and, like, just yeah,
yeah,
the Pumpkinhead, yeah. I didn't know Jeff, but I kind of felt like I did because we had conversed a number of times, and I was we were trying to pick out a good day and time to do one of these, and then he passed away. So,
yeah,
yeah. But yeah, really underrated filmmaker. No doubt about it.
totally. There's a
Yeah.
couple like I find like Jeff Burr, Jeff Lieberman too. Is always get like does
Oh,
never gets like never gets put on that pedestal, but like with like Larry Cohen or somebody. But I feel like they're one and the same. Like they're
yeah.
yeah.
Just Before Dawn's one of my favorite slashers.
Oh,
Just
absolutely.
so atmospheric and eerie and just I
And
love that thing to death.
dirty, and it's just like
And
it
dirty.
feels so much grimier, but not like due to lack of funds or quality. It's just like, oh, this is the tone. This is
Yeah.
it's almost like a weird. uh, beneath the surface, like subsurface grime to it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, love that movie to death. Eh, so 2 things that are integral, I think, to any slasher movie, especially to me, is the kills and the
Mhm.
killer. How did you come up with the backstory for Johnny, his look, the mask, his weapons of choice, all that good stuff?
Uh, Trying to tie it all back into like a function of the story. So for Johnny, everything just seemed to be, um, what would the story of a slasher like in Northern Ontario be? What would his backstory be? Um, and so much of like all the really iconic slashers, I guess maybe save for Michael Myers, but he's kind of like a victim of circumstance too. But they're all just like everything seems natural. Like they naturally found this, they naturally found their weapons, they naturally found their outfit or their mask. Um, and for us, it was thinking back to, okay, we're in the woods, Northern Ontario. We wanted him to have this mythology born, not in a present day, but maybe like a campfire story that's been told for decades.
Mm,
So looking at that, we like realized that the logging industry and the forestry industry, not only would be a great place to set this, but also had so many weapons to choose from,
mm,
from that could be
mhm,
tied
mhm.
in. So like once I started going down that hole and found like even just a hewing axe, like we kind of made it a hatchet shape, but like they're just so broad and they look so beefy and muscly. And then like the drag hooks, um, were like just as soon as you saw them, I was just like, oh, that's perfect. That's gotta
Mhm.
use that. Um, and there's a couple of other things, even the draw knife. I mean, it's a smaller, it's like more of a carpenter's draw knife that's used to cut
Oh,
Aaron's
yeah.
head in half. But like,
Yeah.
the much bigger ones would be used to take the bark and branches off of timbers. Uh, so all that felt like, okay, this is the perfect home for him to live in and the perfect, like the most fruitful place for him to have weapons or like be familiar with these weapons that he's using. And then tangentially, I did go out on a bit of a stretch for the mask, but I felt like I was able to tie it into the firefighting and the wild firefighters well enough to like to be excusable. But that was a mask that I saw on uh uh on like a cracked.com list of creepy items from the past or creepy relics from the past, and I just always love that mask. I was like, this is one of the scariest, moodiest things, and I don't know why nobody's had it in a slasher
It
film.
it's very insect-like with those round eyes, and he's got
Yeah.
like a almost like a or those like a stinger hanging off,
Yeah, like a proboscis, like
a
with the
proboscis,
yeah,
that's the word I was looking for, yeah.
yeah, a word I learned from mosquito. Uh, look at the size of that proboscis. Um,
Exactly, yeah.
yeah.
Great, that's another great movie too.
But, uh but yeah, it is very, like, insect-like and even just the shape of the dome of his head and yeah. So, bringing that in and kinda tying that into the locale and the mythology, it was yeah. And then actually his outfit itself, we just thought, if you were to stumble across clothing, what kind of
Mm,
clothing would he be stumbling across? So we just went the flannel, the shirt, the khakis, just to be, like, somewhat of a, keeping with that lumberjack theme. Um,
mhm,
yeah. The iconography was very important for us,
yeah,
just because,
yeah.
we're gonna be staring at it the whole time. So, we just thought, like, it's really gotta be something that doesn't seem so slapdash.
When it comes to, like, the way Johnny walks, his movements, did you have any particular direction for Rye Barrett who came in who plays Johnny?
Yeah.
Did you have any particular direction for him, or did he just kinda
Yeah, he brought a lot
go with
to
it?
it. Yeah. Um, I don't if I'm finding what I want in a performance, I try not to talk.
Mm,
Um, I don't wanna to pollute that with anything. So, the way he was walking and the way he would move, it was so important. It was something that we realized was really important when we looked at the footage from that first 4 weeks we shot, and just being able to see very, very clearly when we had our first actor in the costume and when we had a replacement in the costume, and the differences in everything, like the gait of their footfalls, the way the way their hips would move as they walk, or their shoulders, or everything. Like you're watching it under a microscope, and you realize, like, oh, we gotta zero in on this when we're shooting it again. We got to really figure this out. And so we did actually just shoot some practices. We shot some test footage of Rye in the costume with the mask on, just with holding the weapons, just to see how he felt. And once he started to feel comfortable with it, it was just like an afternoon of shooting. Um, but yeah, the more comfortable he got with everything, the more it just seemed to fit for who Johnny was, and
Mm,
how he acts as like the heartbeat of the film, just with his walking alone. So really the only direction I gave him while walking most of the time was uh faster or slower. Just
mm,
just if we were like, yeah, maybe a little quicker here. It was a lot of telling where I wanted beats of stopping. So like, you walk here, you stop, you give a beat, turn your head, things like that. It was never it was a very like performative instruction, but most of the time he just did his thing, and he was nailing it and bringing things to my attention that I would have never even considered. So it was like, yeah, go with it. You obviously know this character.
yeah. One of my favorite moments just in the movie in general is when Johnny finds the keychain with the
Hmm.
car on it, and he just takes it's like he takes a time out from his own movie, and
Yeah,
he's like, he sits down, takes his mask off, he plays with the car, and, like, it reminds you that, like, there's still a measure of innocence there in
there's
that
still
character.
something there. Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah,
you could see, despite the makeup and whatnot, you could see it, he perfectly displayed like that, in that silent performance, in just that
yeah.
moment. I thought that was just an awesome scene, and then, of course, he crushes it, and it's back to business,
Hmm.
so that's a great scene. I freaking love that scene.
Oh, thanks so much.
Yeah, great stuff. And kudos for casting Lauren Marie Taylor from Friday the 13th Part 2.
Oh, I mean, that was just a lottery win for us. Yeah, we really wanted somebody from the Friday series in the film, because as much as it is like a take on slashers in general, it's like it undeniably owes so much to the Friday series, and we didn't want to pretend like that wasn't the case. So
Right,
we
right.
really wanted somebody from the Friday series. We really wanted um, somebody that wouldn't be immediately recognizable. We wanted like like a real performance, like something to give that especially that role a lot of gravitas, because it's a odd role. You're coming in at the very end of the movie. You're
Mhm, mhm,
spewing out like 7 pages of dialogue, and you're the whole time threading this needle between like comfort and threat.
mhm,
And
mhm,
it's it's a weird thing to do. So, we approached a couple of different people from the Friday series to do it, and it was the kind of thing where this was also COVID time, so we're meeting over
right.
Zoom, and as soon as we talked to Lauren, it was right away just kind of hit. Just realizing like, oh, she just got the energy for it. She understands what we're trying to do. She knows that it's um not a fan film, but a movie made by fans.
Right,
And like
right.
that distinction was pretty important for us. But we wanted somebody too that would be like, to give that performance, and to have people who wouldn't be, diehard Friday fans, to be like, oh, I wonder who that was. And then find out that it was like, oh, she was in Friday too. And this obviously wasn't just like an accident. And then, yeah, and then make that connection. Um, but also, like, I'm a huge fan of John Avildsen's Neighbors with John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd,
Ah,
where
okay.
where she plays Belushi's daughter, and I'm just like, yeah. So that was fun for me.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Was the whole point behind that scene to kind of um divert expectations? Because at this point the movie's shifted. It's no
Mhm.
Johnny's story's over. He's got his locket, he's back at the ruins of the thing, and
Yeah,
his arc is ended. Now we're
yeah,
on with, the final girl, and this is her. This is, you shifted things around, right? Where normally the movie focuses the opening of the movie, the first whatever hour is like, here's your characters, here's your the
yeah.
slasher fodder, and the killer just pops up occasionally, and then at the end it's all, the chase and whatnot. So was that, and of course, I'm sure, well, I know and I'm sure a lot of people out there were expecting Johnny to jump up at the end, but he doesn't. So
Yeah.
you were was that intentional, that you were sort of diverting expectations and whatnot?
Not no. It's a hard thing not to take credit for. Uh, but it's an interesting outcome because while I was writing it, like from the very start, I knew that like Johnny's not going to appear. So we shot it for no tension. We just shot it to play out as it is because like as we approached it, it was like, oh no, this is the ending monologue. This is the
Mhm.
epilogue. This is our thematic coda. Um, so we never shot it to be tense, but we did have that in mind for Chris, the final girl, that she would still be in that state of mind, that she would still be tense. Um, so that was one thing that was really unexpected for us after we showed it to in the first few screenings when people were just commenting like, "Oh, that was a really tense ending." And we're like, "Oh, really?"
Mhm,
Because like,
mhm, mhm.
but then it's also like, yeah, I guess we knew how it was going to end, so it wasn't that tense for us. But it definitely like wanted to create that mindset, wanted to have that come across with Chris, with that final girl, of like what does this do to somebody? I know it's like fantastical, and slashers are just an invention of film, um for the most part. I mean, there are the Texarkana killers, but
Mm,
it still is something like, well, what would that do? What does that kind of trauma do to somebody? And it just has them, whether they're safe or not, looking into the woods for the rest of their life. And
mm.
that's
Yeah.
exactly what we were trying to convey.
Oh, that's beautiful. What does the ti by the way, what does the title "In a Violent Nature" mean to you?
Um, it's just trying to, you know, have a somewhat um oh, what's the word, like I'm looking for an exploitative title, I guess, in a way where I'm like, where you're thrown in these big spotlight words like violent and
Mhm,
stuff
mhm,
to bring in that of it, that area of an audience, but also um convey Johnny's behavior, and also harken back to how different that is from anything else in the woods, because the woods are like terrifying. They're
right,
like, I mean, if you're unprepared for them, if you don't respect them. I mean, there's been a few times where you just I've just been turned around camping
mhm,
and find myself like just not in eyesight of the trail or of the access road, and
mhm,
have
mhm,
no idea where I am anymore. And the dread that sets in if you're not prepared for that, and when you realize how at risk you are, uh, yeah, it's really scary. And I grew up in the woods too, so I
mhm,
find that always fascinating, the fact that
mhm.
it's all out there. That's what the world is. The world is the woods, and it's not a fun place to be, and it shouldn't be looked at as like a vacation spot. so
Mhm.
uh so that's what we were also trying to convey with the title, that Johnny, that it relates to the setting just as much as it does to Johnny.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very well put. Very well put. I know exactly what you mean. I was hiking with some friends one time years ago, and I stopped to like tie my shoe, and they literally just went on.
Yeah.
And I felt it, and like I kept like I should have caught up with them by now. I should have caught up with them by now, and I just didn't. And like the weirdest thing happened. I'm sure it was all in my head, but all of a sudden the woods were just completely quiet and still. And
Mhm.
if you've ever been in the woods, you know they're not quiet, they're not still. But like in that
Yeah.
moment, and I was like, "Holy shit, this is what's going on here?" Just
Yeah,
totally
where
dropped.
where your brain starts focusing on almost like the wrong things, where you get this object permanence of everything that you've been hearing for so long, and all your all you're trying to hear, all you're striving to hear is your friends in the distance, and it's
Mhm.
nothing, just cut
Nothing.
off completely. And the forest is, it just insulates itself.
Mhm.
It's, sounds bouncing off all of these trees and just dampening and
Mhm.
dampening. So it's, yeah,
Mhm.
it doesn't carry. Your voice
No, it
does
doesn't.
not carry.
No, no, yeah, totally. Yeah, that's about the freakiest moment I've ever had in the woods. But the movie received a lot of buzz. As a first-time filmmaker, I can't imagine the pressure you had to be feeling. It seems like a real make it or break it kind of moment. How closely were you watching, like, the box office totals opening weekend?
I mean, we were interested for sure. We It wasn't like a close thing to watch, really. I was just I would just get like updates from my producer, just being like, "Hey, we did this. Hey, we did this. This is good." Like I mean, the fact that we were able to open on 1,400 screens across America, and even just crack the top 10 is wild. Like, it's really way more than we expected. We expected this to like find a home on streaming, not be advertised like super well, and then best case scenario, we play some genre festivals, we get like some word of mouth spreading, and then and that's it. Just have it be um, a nice step up to be making another feature and in the future. But yeah, what's happened with it and how it's taken off is something we never expected at all.
You can admit it, you did a little happy dance when those numbers came in. You
I
can
think
admit it.
at the time I was working as a grip on a student film. So
Wow.
it
Okay,
was,
okay.
yeah,
Did you go like, "Hey, my movie's in the top 10 of the box office?" You
it doesn't get the cables in the trucks any quicker. So
Oh, god. Well, I mean, how do you feel about the reaction to the film from horror fans? I mean, surely you've kinda kept your pulse you kept a finger on the pulse of
I stopped
the
paying
community.
attention after it hit theatrical. Um, Yeah, when it was just still playing, festivals and stuff, we were always, a lot more attentive to, critical reviews and audience reviews and what Letterbox was saying. But once it hit theatrical, I just had to tune out. We knew it was gonna be a divisive movie. We knew exactly what we were making, and, we knew not everybody was gonna be on board for it. Um,
Mm,
so at that point in time, like I'm still, you know, as much as you want to callous yourself to it, it's no matter how many people reach out and say like, "Hey, I really enjoyed your film." It really is that one that was just like, "Hey, just so you know, you didn't make a good movie. I did not enjoy myself in the theater. You should probably take some time to kill yourself in the next few few days." Those
wow.
ones are like the ones that are like, "Okay, that's
Yeah,
the one I'm feeling."
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
But, so at that point in time, you just yeah, I just kinda plugged out or, like, unplugged. Um,
Mhm,
we're still, like the positive response is still way, way higher than we would have ever thought, so, like, I'm happy about that, and then even just having people that you have such reverence for, talk about your film, like, having Stephen King tweet about it was, like,
mhm,
wild to us. the Toronto Film Festival just finished, and Steven Soderbergh had a panel, and he actually brought up the film, which we heard
Wow.
through friends, and we were just like, wow, it's really crazy to us that we're on the radar for these people at all.
Yeah.
So
That's
those do
awesome.
like outweigh outweigh some of
Yeah,
the
that's
negatives. Yeah,
yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's yeah. The guy in the basement who told you to KYS over a
yeah,
movie. The Stephen King's admiration's a little worth a little more
yeah. But
than
why doesn't that guy love me? I don't know.
that. Not everybody's gonna love you, Chris. Not
I know,
everybody's gonna love you.
right?
So here's something that I thought was elevated horror,
Yeah,
which in a violent nature has been called. I think I heard it be referenced as quote unquote elevated horror a
yeah.
million or so times. I do not like that term. What are your
And I
thoughts
think
on the
it's
term?
reserved exclusively for A24 films. I don't think it applies to Shutter. But yeah, I kind of hate. I really hate the term. I hate it because it's just horror. Like it's all. You don't say elevated comedy. You don't say
E-
elevated drama. It's just
Exactly.
it's something to kind of take out the bad word of horror
Yes.
because there are people that want to just say horror is the lowest barometer. It's like
Yes.
sh- sh- you're not calling when Rosemary's Baby came out, it wasn't elevated horror. It was
Right.
horror.
It was hard. Yeah.
When The Exorcist came out, it was horror. It's like this is what it is. You have your good and your bad, and just for cinema across the board, you're gonna have way more bad than there is good. You know,
Yeah.
no, yeah.
Yeah.
For every drama that gets revered, there are so many bad dramatic films made that are
Yes.
just ignored. I think the fact that genre is also, an exploitation metric. So
Mhm.
you can
Mhm.
make an exploitation film that doesn't have a star-studded cast, that doesn't have like the biggest budget, that can still make an impact in culture. I think that
Mhm.
that's really why some marketing and even some critics want to delineate between elevated horror and like, you know, I guess like what would be just video store stuff
Just
that,
the
they wouldn't even care to look at on any merit.
yeah, yeah. As a matter of fact, when I reviewed In a Violent Nature, the whole back end of that review was me railing against the term elevated horror for the reasons that you mentioned there. It just seems like horror is horror. Why do we
Mhm.
have to, you know, class again? You don't hear, well, that was a really elevated romantic comedy. You
Yeah.
know, why do you have to reserve that for horror? Because we can't just give respect to the genre. Like that's a good horror movie. We can't just say it's a good horror movie. We have to
Yeah.
add this terminology to it. I hate that. It's crap.
It's like when like what was it? I don't know why I can't remember it. You remember the that Lindsay Lohan movie, I Know Who Killed Me?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like, one of the best reviews of that movie I heard because it was got panned, and, like, one of the best reviews I heard was like, "Oh, if this was an Italian film, everyone would love it." And it's,
Mm,
like, so true. You just you know, the amount of grace that is given to certain segments of the film making community and the certain regions is, like, I don't know, it's really it's both weird and interesting. Um
yeah,
and it kind of also dictates just how the culture is moving at that time.
yeah, yeah. Uh, well, In a Violent Nature 2 has
Hmm.
been announced. I understand that you'll be writing, but not directing. Is that right?
We're still, honestly, we are so
Okay.
early in the stages that like we just want to make sure that we've got something on the page that we are happy with,
Okay.
and that's going to be different enough but still the same, I
Mhm,
suppose,
mhm.
to feel like it still lives in that same world, but at the same time we're not retreading uh, the ground. because we've tread a lot of ground with the first one.
Johnny got his steps in. That's for
Yes.
sure.
Yeah.
He got his steps in. So, the obvious question that everyone at home is wondering is, same perspective? Are we gonna maybe shift things around, or are we gonna is Johnny back, or we got somebody else? What are we? I know, again, I know it's very early, but what are the ideas floating around there? If you don't mind.
Oh, well, the main idea that we have is like so much of the first film was uh, paying tribute to kind of more art house stuff that we loved and seeing and trying to like see how that would look like in the genre world. So at this point where we're experimenting like just conceptually with different areas of, what would be more like celebrated art house cinema and like experimental cinema that we really, really love to make it work like as an exploitation film. Um, but but yeah, one consistent thing is we are looking to bring Johnny back, of course.
Okay, all right. It'd be good to see old Johnny again.
Yeah, I miss him too.
Yeah, poor guy. He got a bad rap. Um, so I do have some questions from the viewers.
Sure.
First off, how you figure? Thank you very much for the $10 super chat. That's very kind of you. How you figure says, loved how you took inspiration with Gus Van Sant films such as Last Days and Jerry for the pacing tracking shots of the film. Was that also the inspiration for the sound design? Great interview. Thank you.
Uh, yes and no. Actually, like the main inspiration for the sound design was the other movie that we constantly like ripped off in some ways. Was No Country for Old Men, and that was the first movie I watched where afterwards I was like, oh, this should have sound design. This is like a crime thriller. Or not sound design. This should have like a soundtrack and stuff. This is a crime thriller. Uh, and it's supposed to be an integral part of it. So when we were conceiving this, and like I really felt like, oh, what if we don't have a soundtrack? And what if we just do sound design? And so yeah, No Country is like the movie that for us just had sound design and that really told the story of the environment as well. But then looking back at all the Gus Van Sant stuff, too, and even Alan Clark's Elephant, which Gus Van Sant took inspiration from, or at least felt really aided him in developing his own elephant. That's another one where it's just very in camera diegetic sound design.
Yeah. My buddy Parker, thank you for 11 months of being a channel member. He wants to know, how did you meet Kostansky? Big fan, by the way. The special
Oh
effects.
yeah,
Yeah, guy.
we met at through my producing partner Peter Kaplowski. He is he comes from the film festival world. He's much more of like the film theory, film academic part of filmmaking, and he was a programmer at the Toronto After Dark Film Festival. And I met him the first year of Toronto After Dark. I had a short film that I'd made that played Toronto International Film Festival, and he watched it there, and he was you know just I think he might even still been in school at the time, but he was brought on as the shorts film programmer for After Dark, and so I met him there. That's where we started our friendship, and then he just is somebody that was always on the hunt for new filmmakers and just interesting film. And he heard about Astronaut Six out of Winnipeg, um, and he started playing their shorts. And it was then that he would always like bring up Kostansky and Astronaut Six in general and saying that I should meet them. And when they ended up premiering Father's Day at the Toronto After Dark Festival, I had a short play in front of that, and that was when we first like just chatted, and I got to meet those guys, and that was might have been like 2010, 2011, maybe. So yeah, that's where we met, and from then we just always been on each other's radar, helping out however we can. So like even in the original BioCop short, I'm there as like an extra, as one of the gang members. And and then when he ended up doing The Void, they shot it in my hometown of Sault Ste. Marie, and which is in Northern Ontario. And Northern Ontario has a certain tax credit that you can get for making films if you do local hires and stuff. So they were shooting it up there, and I was still just doing effects work out of my garage at that point, and I didn't work in a shop. And he was helping me out with a music video I was doing some builds, and he just said, "Hey, you should come and work on The Void. We're shooting in the Sioux. You know, it would be great to have you out there." And I was really nervous because I didn't want to, because I felt like I didn't know what I was doing at all. I was just like
Mhm.
some guy that worked in their basement. I didn't want to like embarrass myself in front of a professional prosthetics artists.
Yeah.
But then you get there and you realize, oh, it's everybody's just hacking through it, trying to make anything work no matter what. And there is technique, but it's also just like so much of the technique is willing to experiment with different things. And yeah, so that was my first time working with him, like I guess in a more professional way, was on The Void.
Oh, very cool. Not a question, but thank you, Matt, for the 4.99. And he says, thank you both for doing the stream. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate
You're
that.
very welcome.
Let's see here. We do have a couple of more questions. I'll try and squeeze in here. Uh, oh, my buddy Horror Orman wants to know, will Lauren Marie Taylor be a part of the sequel?
We're still, I mean, it's such early days. Such early days. I can't say. I would love to work with Lauren again though. It was like that was just such a pleasure. And yeah, working with somebody with that kind of pedigree. Like
Mhm.
she'd done everything, and she'd been in soaps forever too. And it's like I find any kind of soap opera actor to just be like fascinating with how well they can recite lines, how they have to like get material and then almost immediately perform it. It's pretty wild. But yeah, I would love to work with Lauren again on anything.
Yeah. Let's see here. What else have we got? Eli wants to know, was there a lot of hoops you had to jump through to make it an R rate to get an R rating? Or was it ever floating in the line between R and
Oh, it's
the
not it's
forbidden
not even
rating?
R-rated. It's unrated. Uh,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Oh,
So they wanted to
okay.
bring it down to I think there was a point where it was discussion of getting um I think we were being rated NC-17, but um they never tell you for what. They just say like, here's your rating, cut away at it, submit it again. Maybe you'll
Yeah.
get under the bar, but we're not telling you what we don't like about it, or what makes it hit this criteria. Um, so yeah, there was just discussion about what do we do, because for some of the things like the axe splitter gag, for instance, it's like the whole point of that gag is that it's one continuous, becoming one continuous shot where we're forced to sit in it. And so if you're cutting out of that, or cutting between like the gore and like there's really nothing to cut to. But you're also ruining the whole effect. Like you're ruining
Yeah.
what it's supposed to convey. So yeah, the Shutter decided to, like, let's just do it unrated. Let's just let it exist as it is and not tamper with it. And there had been some precedent for that, with like Terrifier 2 and stuff being
Yeah.
unrated, that it was just like, okay, this is something that isn't impossible to do. So yeah,
Mm,
just another
very cool.
case of other slashers carving out the path for us to live in.
Well, speaking of other slashers, Distorted Visions would like to know, Chris, what would you say are your five favorite non-franchise slashers?
Non-franchise slashers, like, that just didn't get their own franchise. That's a weird one. Uh, I guess The Miner. It's definitely from My Bloody Valentine.
Hmm.
Um, Cropsy for
The
sure.
Burning. Oh God,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, and it's a difficult. See, there's some that I'm like, okay, is this a slasher or is this just like a hillbilly in the woods? Uh, I don't know, but I love Rituals. Um, but another one, it's kind of a slasher, kind of a thriller. It's a French film with that came out in the maybe late '90s, early 2000s, called Deep in the Woods with Dennis Levant, and it's this very weird kind of slashery thriller that plays a lot with uh, different interpretations of Little Red Riding Hood and incorporating them into the actual slasher mythos. Um,
Mm.
there's another one. Oh, this is I don't even know if this is a slasher either, but it kind of feels like it because it's like a uh, torture house type slasher thing. But it's called Kolobos. Uh, Came out in the mid '90s, I believe. If you ever watch it, you'll immediately be struck by how much of a sound alike to the Suspiria soundtrack is on the whole thing. But it's a really wild movie with a lot of interesting like tone and kills in it. Yeah,
Mm. Totally agree with you about The Burning, one of my favorite
yeah,
slashers of all time. And I actually got to meet Peter Cowper this past weekend at Horror Hound, who played Harry Warden in or the miner in
yeah,
My Bloody Valentine. So that was cool.
yeah. I mean, also it's just another Canadian
Of course, of
film, so
course,
gotta give props to that.
of course. Last question here for my buddy Eerie Spirit. What are some of Chris's favorite horror novels?
Oh my goodness. I am not much of a horror novel reader. Uh I'm gonna have to go back to um Thinner because
Mm,
that's just one that I really, really loved, and I do find myself like kind of rereading it every now and then. I love like I said, I'm a real fan of like existential dread and existential horror. So, like, I would even consider like Kafka to be a horror, or Kobo Abe, who wrote like Face of Another and Woman in the Dunes, which are very much along those lines of existential horror. Um, Big fan of him as well. Ambrose Bierce, actually, I really really love his work. Um, Although it's like mainly all short stories and stuff. But yeah, I don't read a lot of horror fiction. But I will give a shout out to Tony Burgess, who the writer of like Pontypool, which was Pontypool Changes Everything, was the actual novel that was based off of. If anybody's watched it, um, he is just such a poet. His prose is amazing. And when I first read Pontypool Changes Everything, which was like years before the film came out, I was just struck by how much everything flowed and how much respect he was giving the words to tell this wacko story, like apocalyptic story of like zombies that are spread through language. And
mhm.
if you ever get a chance to read the book, it it breaks out of that DJ booth. If you've only seen the film, it breaks out of that DJ booth within like the first 30 pages or something. It becomes like a worldwide epidemic. It's pretty wild.
Ah, okay. Interesting. Very interesting. Well, Chris, where can we do you have anything that any projects anything going on maybe a little more recent than in Violent Nature 2 you want to promote or
No, no. Honestly, we've just been focused on that at the moment. If anybody's like hitting the festival circuit or anything and wants like to keep an eye out for anything, there's like there's this crime film called Dead Male that I love that I will promote to anybody that wants to go see it. It's like if Misery was about synthesizers and directed by the Coen brothers.
well,
It's really kind of crazy. I
it
absolutely love it. Other than that,
Dead Male?
pardon?
Dead Male?
It's called Dead Mail. Yeah, it's
Oh,
because a lot of it uh, centers around a dead letter office.
oh,
But
cool.
yeah,
Okay.
it's fantastic. It's really, really, really great. Um, Beyond that, we just finished doing working on principal photography for Kostansky's remake of Deathstalker. So, we're just waiting to see how that comes out. And it was like a ton of fun. It was just uh, it just feels like the perfect project for him. So yeah, and also of
That's
course Frankie Frico, his newest film, which is playing at Fantastic Fest, just played at Fantasia. Yeah, if anybody's in Austin this weekend, go check that out because it could be my favorite Kostansky film.
oh, cool. Is there any social media that you want to throw out there so people can keep track of what's going on in your world, or with updates on In a Violent Nature too?
I mean, my Instagram is just is Gasfire Films, all one word on Instagram. But I don't. I'll sometimes repost some stuff, but for the most part, it's kind of just a lot of nonsensy bullshit that I throw up on. throw up on there. I'm pretty terrible at self promotion.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, hey, most of social media is just that kind of stuff anyway. Just
Yeah, exactly.
that's social media as a whole, isn't it? But again, Chris, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you taking the time out to do this. Great conversation. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Really, really appreciate you reaching out to me too, Justin.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for all the questions. It's been great.
Yeah. Yeah. This was great, man. Again, so much fun talking to you, and not just kissing your butt because you're here. Like, this In a Violent Nature is one of my favorite movies of the year, hands down. So really excited for the sequel.
Well, thanks so much. Yeah. Hope it pays off. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will.
yeah. All right. Well, thanks everybody for the questions too. Appreciate that.
Yeah, right on. Yeah. Shout out to everybody who tuned in. Thank you guys for being here. Have a great rest of your night, and we'll see you again soon. Take care.
Take it
Peace.
easy.